Iran thought it had cracked the code. Buried beneath layers of soil and reinforced concrete, a structure so deeply entombed that no weapon on Earth was supposed to reach it. Months of feverish construction, hundreds of truckloads of raw material, a secret facility hidden from satellites, hidden from intelligence agencies, hidden from the world, or so Iran thought. Because on the morning of March 11th, 2026, the illusion ended. 3 holes. That is all it took. 3 massive impact craters punched clean through Iran's supposedly impenetrable concrete sarcophagus at a facility inside a sprawling military complex southeast of the capital. And with them, one of the most significant chapters of a broader operation was written into history. What just happened there was not merely a military strike. It was a statement, a demonstration of a capability gap so vast, so overwhelming that the most carefully constructed defenses turned out to be little more than theater. Let us start at the beginning. The site is not a new name in the world of nuclear intelligence. It sits inside a complex that has been on the radar of international inspectors and intelligence agencies for decades. According to analysis from non-proliferation experts, the original building dated back to an earlier weapons plan in the early 2000s. It contained a specially built cylindrical high-explosive test chamber equipped with flash X-ray technology capable of capturing the interior dynamics of detonation experiments. In 2003, Iran reportedly conducted a critical nuclear weapons test there, a scaled-down trial of a multi-point initiation system or shockwave generator designed to uniformly detonate the main explosive charge in a miniaturized nuclear weapon. Read that again slowly. Iran was testing the detonation mechanisms for a miniaturized nuclear bomb at this location in 2003. The international nuclear watchdog never visited the building. Iran never acknowledged what happened inside those walls. And for years, the site sat quietly, sanitized, stripped of its most sensitive equipment. Officially unremarkable. Then came October 2024. A devastating airstrike targeted the facility as part of a broader campaign against military infrastructure. According to open-source intelligence reports, the strike caused major damage. Analysis suggests that just before the bombing, the facility was being used to manufacture high-purity plastic explosives, a moldable material that serves as an essential component of shockwave generators, the kind used in nuclear weapons development. Iran's denials rang hollow. But destruction was not the end of the story. It was just the intermission. By May 2025, satellite imagery began revealing something alarming. Iran had started rebuilding, not just patching the damage, but rebuilding from the ground up with an entirely new design philosophy. The goal was clear: make the site survive the next strike. A reinforced steel frame was erected first, then a metal roof structure sealed over it. Then came the concrete, thick, hardened, poured in layers to form what analysts would later describe as a concrete sarcophagus. And then in a final act of burial, engineers covered the entire structure with massive quantities of soil. Open-source intelligence noted publicly that over the preceding 2 to 3 weeks, the concrete sarcophagus had hardened and soil was moved over large portions of the new facility. The message from Tehran was unmistakable. Try to bomb us now. It was a message that would be answered with devastating precision. The coordinated campaign launched on February 28, 2026, when airstrikes began across military and nuclear infrastructure. In the first week alone, the infrastructure was systematically dismantled, and crushing pressure was applied to long-range strike capabilities. The wider complex was among the targets hit on March 6th. Satellite imagery confirmed multiple strikes on facilities that day, but the specific hardened bunker was notably left untouched. That changed on March 11th. Imagery released that morning showed 3 massive impact points running in a precise line across the top of the facility positioned directly above the structure housing the suspected high-explosive test chamber. Military aviation analysts were among the first to study the photographs. Their conclusion? The impact points were at least broadly consistent with the use of the most powerful non-nuclear bunker-busting weapons in the world. 3 holes. But these were not just any holes. Analysts provided a stunning composite image overlaying the post-strike photograph onto pre-strike imagery. The precision was extraordinary. The bombs were not only precisely on target along the length of the main suspected test chamber. The imagery also showed that the blasts had penetrated the concrete sarcophagus entirely. Evidence came from a critical detail. A protective defensive wall just outside the northern entrance of the facility had been knocked down by an outward blast. Outward, which means the explosion happened inside. The bunker busters made it through. They detonated precisely where they were supposed to detonate inside the facility itself. Additionally, a small building southeast of the main structure was partially destroyed by the concussion waves. And separately, it was confirmed that fire control and instrumentation buildings at an adjacent site had also been fully destroyed, too far away to have been hit by concussion blast, strongly suggesting follow-up strikes targeting the surrounding external structures. The picture that emerged was one of clinical, methodical destruction. The bunker had been reached, breached, and obliterated. Now, and this is important, there is a genuine question of attribution. One nation claimed the strike. On March 12, 2026, the military officially stated it had struck the compound, a site used by the regime to advance nuclear weapons capabilities. The compound was used to develop advanced explosives and conduct sensitive experiments as part of a covert project in the 2000s. The strike was described as part of an operation designed to inflict deep and ongoing damage to the foundations of the nuclear program. That nation absolutely struck the target. That much is confirmed. The question is whether they did it alone or whether a larger ally joined them with something far more powerful. Here is where the weapon comes in. The massive ordnance penetrator weighs 30,000 pounds. It was developed specifically after the limitations of earlier bunker-busting weapons became apparent during military assessments. Where other large bombs deliver a massive above-ground blast, this weapon was engineered for a completely different mission: to go through hardened targets, to penetrate, to reach the underground. Its design is deliberately brutal in its simplicity. An extremely hardened outer casing, enormous impact velocity from high-altitude delivery, and a delayed internal detonation trigger, meaning the bomb stays intact through the concrete, through the soil, through whatever barrier stands in its path, and only detonates once it has reached the interior of the target structure. According to defense analysis, this penetrator can pierce approximately 60 meters, roughly 200 feet, of reinforced concrete before detonating its warhead. The warhead itself carries a substantial explosive payload, and when that explosion is contained within an underground bunker, the effect is catastrophic and total. Critically, only one aircraft in the world can carry this weapon, the stealth bomber. Each one can carry 2 of them. And as was confirmed from the very start of operations, these stealth aircraft were operational. Military command posted on March 1st that stealth bombers had struck hardened ballistic missile facilities, stating plainly that no nation should ever doubt American resolve. The impact points at the site matched what was seen at other known hardened targets in previous campaigns, when a dozen such penetrators were used. The comparison imagery showed striking visual consistency. Large, deep impact points in a line above hardened underground structures. The same signature, the same weapon. There is, however, a notable difference between previous strikes and what happened here. In the past, a specific vulnerability had been exploited: ventilation shafts. The weapons were guided directly into those shafts, allowing them to penetrate even deeper before detonating. The targeted nation subsequently tried to seal those shafts with concrete, but by then the damage was done. At this new facility, there appeared to have been no accessible ventilation shafts. The facility had been almost entirely encased. So the strike was direct, straight down through the concrete and soil, and it worked. As aviation observers noted, the facility simply was not protected deeply enough. The site had been buried under concrete and soil, but 200 feet of penetration capability is not a problem to be solved with dirt. Let us talk about what was actually built and why it was not enough. According to satellite imagery, work had been rapidly accelerating in the weeks before the operation began. The process was methodical. First, the steel frame and metal roof went up. Then the concrete was poured in multiple layers to form a hardened shell, and then soil was moved in massive quantities to cover the entire structure. By mid-January 2026, the concrete sarcophagus was already hardened. The soil was added in the final weeks. Defense experts describe the site as having been turned into a concrete sarcophagus, a term that proved grimly prophetic. Because just as ancient sarcophagi are built to house the dead, the construction project ended up serving the same function. The effort was significant and it failed completely. There was also a broader strategic context to the hardening work. Similar fortification efforts had been observed at several other military complexes across the country. Tunnels were being reinforced. Entrances to underground facilities were being hardened. As recently as mid-February, work was still ongoing across multiple sites. The nation was racing to protect its most valuable assets before the inevitable. What was not fully reckoned with was the breadth of the bombing campaign that accompanied the strikes. By the time the facility was hit on March 11th, the operation had already evolved far beyond its initial phase. The Air Force had deployed a fleet of heavy bombers to forward bases. Operating alongside the stealth platforms, these aircraft were being equipped with precision-guided munitions fitted with smaller bunker-busting warheads, what some called mini-penetrators. With air defenses estimated to have been reduced by roughly 80% by mid-March, a level of air dominance had been reached that allowed non-stealth bombers to operate with increasing confidence over hostile territory. That meant the facility was not just hit by the most powerful bunker busters ever deployed. It was hit in a target-rich environment where strikes were being conducted virtually at will, and there was the inventory to keep doing it. There has been deliberate quiet regarding the size of the stockpile, but key details have emerged. Defense publications reported in February 2026 that a deal worth more than $100 million had been finalized to replenish stocks used during previous operations. Based on an estimated cost of approximately $4 million per bomb, that contract represents at least 25 new weapons on top of whatever remained in existing inventory. America had used 14 such weapons previously. The restocking was already underway before the current operation even began. The stealth bombers were confirmed to have been repositioning to Allied bases as early as March 4th. They were being maintained, refueled, and rearmed within striking distance of the target zone. When commenting on the arrival of additional bombers, leadership said publicly that a big wave was coming. That wave arrived. The military situation by mid-March 2026 was grim for the defenders. The facility was gone, destroyed for the second time in less than 2 years, but this time far more thoroughly with bunker busters that penetrated the very defenses that were supposed to guarantee the facility's survival. The wider complex had been devastated across multiple strike waves, and the pattern visible in satellite imagery meant that other underground assets had essentially been marked with targets. The political response was revealing in what it admitted. On March 11th, leadership outlined conditions for ending the war. The statement spoke of recognizing legitimate rights, payment of reparations, and firm international guarantees against future aggression. This was the language of a government seeking an exit, not the declaration of a power that believed it was winning. Meanwhile, the military command continued a defiant posture, launching attacks that, in the context of the broader campaign, amounted to reactive jabs against an adversary delivering sustained, overwhelming force. By the end of March, the strategic situation had shifted further. According to open-source tracking of the conflict, leadership was in serious negotiations with what was described as a new and more rational regime, and warnings were issued that if a deal were not reached, the destruction would expand to power plants, oil wells, and desalination plants, assets that had been deliberately spared up to that point. The strategic picture was clear. One side was looking for an off-ramp. The other was negotiating from a position of total military superiority, with more penetrators available, more bombers positioned, and a list of untouched infrastructure that served as leverage at the negotiating table. 3 holes at the facility had done more to reshape the strategic calculus than years of diplomacy ever managed. Let us put the weapons in perspective one final time, because the gap between what was built and what was deployed is the central story here. Months were spent constructing a hardened bunker: steel frame, concrete shell, soil overburden. Every layer was calculated to absorb blast energy and stop penetrating munitions. It was by any conventional standard a serious defensive investment. The weapon used against it was not designed for conventional standards. It was designed for exactly this, to defeat exactly this kind of hardened, deeply buried structure. Its penetration depth of 200 feet is not a round number pulled from a marketing brochure. It is an engineering specification born from the specific requirement to destroy facilities just like this one. The weapon was purpose-built for the most protected sites. And the stealth bomber that carries it is invisible to radar. It flew overhead. There was no warning. And then 3 30,000-pound bombs fell in a straight line across the roof of the test chamber. And the concrete sarcophagus that had taken months to construct became a burial vault. The evidence confirmed the kill. The outward blast damage at the northern entrance proved the bombs detonated inside. The destroyed instrumentation building at the adjacent site confirmed follow-up strikes took out the remaining above-ground infrastructure. The operation was complete. What comes next is the question that hangs over the region. The remaining hardened sites, other reinforced complexes, the underground missile cities whose entrances have been systematically bombed to keep the arsenal contained. All of them now exist in the shadow of what happened on March 11th. The lesson is unambiguous. Depth of burial and thickness of concrete are not adequate answers to a weapon that penetrates 200 feet of reinforced structure and detonates inside. The capability has been demonstrated twice now that the combination of stealth bomber and penetrator can reach any underground target possessed. The restocking contract with the defense industry ensures that inventory is not the limiting factor. The positioning of aircraft ensures that proximity is not the limiting factor, and the degradation of air defenses ensures that access is not the limiting factor. What remains is a matter of strategic choice. How far does the operation go? Which remaining sites become the next target? Those questions were being answered in real time through the ceasefire negotiations that emerged in late March 2026. But the leverage carried into those talks is measured not in diplomatic communiques. It is measured in 30,000-pound bombs and the stealth aircraft that deliver them without warning. 3 holes. That is what the satellite images showed. 3 holes that told the story of an entire chapter of a clandestine nuclear program. A chapter that had taken years and hundreds of millions of dollars and enormous political capital to protect. 3 holes that confirmed that the most decisive conventional weapon in existence for hardened underground target sets remains unmatched. 3 holes that demonstrated that the stealth bomber still projects power into the most defended corners of the world without detection or resistance. A sarcophagus was built. And that sarcophagus was turned into exactly what that word has always meant, a stone coffin. That is the full story of what happened at that site. And it is a story that will shape how the world thinks about underground military facilities, hardened bunkers, and the weapons designed to destroy them for years to come. Because 3 holes in the ground answered that question better than any press release ever could.